and we remembered this great name, Hayden. And I thought, this will be great because I like the name and I can call him Coach. That kid will not let me call him Coach and never has. Absolutely refuses. So sometimes it just doesn't work. Well, we're continuing this series we're calling Three's Company because we're looking at community within the church, but we're doing so by looking at the lives of three different people in the early church, and we're learning from their relationships with one another. We learned first about how we're created for community, that God is in the Trinity, which means triunity, that God himself is a community of love that invites us into the same, which is why we were created to be in a relationship with other people. We were not made to be alone. We were made to be in families and communities. That's how we're wired, and it's because of our God is community too. So we talked about the churches in the Bible. It's mentioned as community, as family, as marriage, as body, all these images that show us how important we are for one another. And then we started last week looking at the early church and some of the characters that show us that. We started with the life of Paul. And that story of Paul that was converted, that became a follower of Jesus after he had been persecuting them. He met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and his life was changed. But what we saw was that not only did Paul do amazing stuff, he wrote a bunch of the New Testament, he evangelized the Gentiles, he did all this wonderful stuff for God, had a great impact on the church. But he didn't do it alone. We saw last week that there were people that influenced Paul's life, that without them, who knows what would have happened. We had first Ananias, the guy who God sent a messenger to and said, hey, Paul just had this experience on the road and met me, and I need you to go and help him through the next steps. And Ananias is like, no, thank you. This guy kills us. But God said, this is what I need you to do, and Ananias did it. And then we talked about others and read a whole list of people that Paul thanks because of the work in their ministry. People who were family, people who were friends, financial supporters, church leaders, people that influenced Paul so that he became and did the ministry that God called him to. One of those was a guy named Joseph, or as we know him better, Barnabas. Barnabas was his nickname because it means son of encouragement. Can you imagine being somebody that encouraged people so much that people actually named you that? I mean, I know people that are pretty uplifting, but like to the point that this is how everybody knew him. If I said, there's this great guy in the New Testament named Joseph, let's talk about him, the last person you're guessing is Barnabas. You're thinking Jesus' dad, somebody else, but he was such an encourager that they called him the son of encouragement. I had a professor in seminary that when I first got there, and I told you in the last couple of weeks, my family is a very sarcastic family. And so we speak sarcasm more than anything else. So encouragement, it's learned behavior. And so I go to seminary and I have this class with this professor, Dr. Karen Walker Freeberg. And I remember the first time I sat in her class, she was the kind of person that was so kind